In the previous video, we did a full teardown of the awesome new Omni-Terminator, then we took it out for a bash and found that it's a little lacking in power, so today we're gonna fix that. Depending on which version you buy, you're either gonna get this smaller motor with a 45 amp ESC, or the slightly larger motor with a 60 amp ESC, and it comes with this fairly small, fairly low power battery. I think we can do a lot better than that, and Rlaarlo thinks so too, because they include this alternative battery mounting. In order to use that mount, we have to put this ESC in a different location. Looking through the manual, unfortunately, they don't really give us any information on how we're supposed to do that mounting, but if we take a look at this picture, we can see that it appears as though they want us to mount the ESC on top of these rails. You can also see that underneath the rails there are a couple little notches, and they included a couple extra zip ties in the kit. I believe that's where we're supposed to put the ESC. Regardless of which RTR option you get, you're going to be getting this 35C battery, which based on testing is going to be able to put out about 40 amps, so it's going to be a little bit limited on this 45 amp ESC, and it's going to be really limited on the 60 amp ESC that comes in the carbon fiber version. One of the other main differences between the two versions is which transmitter you get. This is the transmitter you get with the carbon fiber version, and this is the transmitter you get with the aluminum version. Obviously, this one has quite a few more features. We'll take a closer look at this later on when I discuss which version I think you should buy. But first, I want to see what this platform can really do, so we got to get these stock electronics out of here. It's nice that this ESC comes on its own little mounting tray. That way we can remove it and get it completely out of the way. Rlaarlo seems to have really stepped up their double-sided tape game from their previous versions. Doesn't look like these are going to be falling off on their own. Unlike the center differential, which you saw in the previous video was fairly difficult to take out, this motor should be pretty easy. Looks like we are going to have to take off this side pod to make things easier, which fortunately just comes off with 4 screws. And now the motor should just slide right out. We're going to be replacing this 2852 motor with this larger 3650. This is quite a bit bigger in diameter, but also a little bit shorter, so it's not really as much bigger as it might seem. The reason we're not going with a bigger motor is because the space between the motor mount and the receiver box is limited, and the receiver box is also the mount for the servo. Fortunately, for those of you that want to run bigger motors, it looks like a standalone servo mount is available in the Rlaarlo upgrades. But we don't have one of those, so this is the motor we're going with. Again, we're dealing with a 1.5mm grub screw here, which immediately stripped out. Probably need to use some heat on that. Fortunately, I think we can get this mount off without taking the pinion off. Okay guys, unfortunately, it does not look like this motor is going to work with the motor mount that's designed for the smaller motor. The carbon fiber version comes with a larger motor mount that's designed to work with these bigger motors. That's a big point toward getting the carbon fiber version. Of course, you could just get the larger motor mount if you needed it. I don't have that mount, so it looks like we're gonna be blowing up, trying 4S on this smaller motor. Should be interesting. I do want to put the included slightly larger pinion on here, so this stripped pinion is going to have to come off. A really easy way to release thread lock is just to heat up your iron and then hold it in the grub screw or screw that you're trying to release. Let it get nice and warm, and then you can go ahead and take that out. It shouldn't take too long, and it'll prevent you from stripping the screw like I already have on this one. Make sure you don't have any solder on the end of your iron because you don't want to put solder in the screw head. That'll be counterproductive. All right, hopefully that'll let us get this grub screw out. Unfortunately, it's still stripped. Gonna have to resort to some more violent measures on this one. While I'm drilling this grub screw out, now's a great time to make sure you're subscribed and you've got that bell hit to get notified of future videos. We've got a ton of awesome stuff coming up and you're not gonna wanna miss it. Fortunately, this grub screw is small and was pretty easy to drill out, but don't do what I did, especially if it's easily accessible and small. Just go ahead and put some heat on it first. The key to success when installing grub screws is first to clean them with alcohol. You can see how dirty it was. That's mostly cutting oil, and it will prevent thread lock from working. And make sure you clean the threads on the pinion as well. Apply your thread locker. Blue usually will work, but red is an option. Just make sure you know that red will be harder to remove. Once you've got this installed and tight, you want to make sure you leave it for 24 hours to cure. If you short or skip any of these steps, chances are the pinion is going to fall off. I'm really not sure if this motor is going to be able to handle 4S. It's certainly too high of a KV, so it'll be really interesting to see what happens. Getting your mesh correct is very important, especially on these finer pitched gears. I've got a full video that shows you how to do that. Make sure you check that out. And that feels just about right. Unfortunately, these bullets are smaller than the bullets for the Castle ESC, so let's get them swapped out. There are 2 different types of wires that come out of a brushless motor, and which one you're dealing with is going to affect how you solder different connectors onto the end. The first kind, like Hobby Wing, will actually have the windings inside soldered to some more flexible wires on the outside. On a lot of motors though, like this one, these wires are just extensions of the windings, and those extensions are going to be enameled, which makes them more difficult to solder on. Because of that, I recommend you just desolder the old connectors and then resolder the new connectors right in place of them rather than cutting these. You can cut them, but getting through that enamel can be a pain, and it really stinks. Most things that are manufactured these days use lead-free solder. It has a higher melting point, so I always recommend adding a little bit of leaded solder to something you're going to be desoldering because it makes it a lot easier to deal with. I just need to heat shrink these up, then let's get the ESC installed. According to this picture, Rlaarlo wants you to mount the ESC right here on these rails. I'm not a big fan of this. In a really bad crash, I feel like these rails could go right through the bottom of this ESC, and there's not really enough room for it anyway. I'm just gonna go ahead and mount this right here on top of the receiver box with double-sided tape. It would be really cool if Rlaarlo would create a mount that goes on these rails. Even having this stock mount fit on here would be neat, or possibly one that integrates this brace cap. This setup really isn't going to be ideal, because if I ever need to get into this radio box, I'm gonna have to take this back off. But if I like this particular combo, I'll figure out a better way to mount it. Of course, we'll be using my favorite VHB. And don't forget, these pressure adhesives need time to come up to full strength as well. Let me get this wiring tidied up, and then we'll see about getting this battery mounted. Removing 4 screws lets us take these stock brackets out, and it looks like we're gonna have to remove these stock pads too. What I did was just cut the back side of the pads off, and then we can fit these holders here, and that's what our straps are gonna go through. If you want a power driver that's tough enough to take out the hardest screws, yet gentle enough to put in these tiny little ones, make sure you check out my modification video that I put out recently. I'm giving one away in that video. And that's how the vertical battery mount works. I have my doubts as to how well this is gonna hold up, but I guess we're gonna find out. Speaking of which, let's go see how fast this thing is on 4S. We had 30 miles an hour with the stock ESC and battery. Let's see what we can do on 4S. She is definitely quicker already. Oh yeah, surprisingly stable still though. All right, one more pass. All right, let's bring it in. 43 miles an hour, that's really good. That's almost a 50% increase, and this thing definitely feels a lot better. Let's see how she bashes on the big ramp. Cool. All right, guys, if you don't like to hear someone fanboy, you might want to look away because this thing is absolutely amazing. I didn't break anything on it. I was beating the crap out of this thing for quite a while out there. Couple of packs, 4S, big air, lots of crashes, and literally nothing broke. The only thing that happened is I lost a blade on the fan, but that's not the car's fault. Other than that, it is still absolutely perfect. Even the body is still in really, really good shape. I was actually also really impressed with this little motor. It could take even more gearing. It really wasn't getting that hot. So should you buy one of these? Yeah, you should buy one of these. But the question is, which one should you buy? You've got 3 options. The first one's gonna be the roller that's got carbon fiber. Then you've got this one, which is the aluminum lower spec one for 200 bucks. Then for 50 bucks more, you've got the one that's got carbon fiber, the bigger motor mount, the bigger motor, and the bigger ESC, as well as, and I think this is the deciding factor, a much better remote. This is the remote you get with the carbon fiber version, and it has the ability to do battery telemetry, has a bunch of programming options, single-handed driving, adjustability for the tension and the spread of the throttle. It is 6-channel, it has several different battery options, and this transmitter alone is 35 bucks. Don't get me wrong, this transmitter is fine, but it's a lower spec transmitter, and it has lower spec features. If you didn't get a better transmitter for the extra $50, I might feel differently about it, but since you do, I would go for the carbon fiber version. You can get that carbon fiber version, get a cheap 10BL120 G2 ESC, slap 4S in this thing, and you're gonna have an absolute absolute weapon of a mini RC truck. That's all I've got to say about it, guys. Let me know down in the comments what you thought about it, then check out one of these.